Ashley Webb with Bustle Textiles. Welcome. The weather here in Virginia is really starting to get chilly, and so I figured it would be the perfect time to feature a piece from my own personal collection, this late 1880s capelet. I've been living with this piece for a little while, and if you visit my blog, which I'll link down below, you will have seen that I took a pattern off of this using the 1892 Madame Liftval method. And in doing that, the construction of this piece, I just thought it was so unique. It's probably not actually unique at all, but I just thought it was amazing. So I actually ended up making a piece for myself, and let me just say that the functionality of this is pretty much non-existent besides keeping you warm. But that's okay. It's a beautiful piece, and I'm really excited to talk about it and show you all the nitty-gritty inside construction details of it. But first, let's talk about how I came to this date.
So this piece is a beautiful black silk velvet with the pile running upward. It has a really bright sheen to it, and it's luxuriously smooth, but with the pile pointing upward, it's fairly rough if you run your hand downward. I had a little bit of trouble dating it, as the style of capelet wasn't extremely popular. It hadn't yet shown up in fashion plates in 1885, but in 1886, 1887, and 1888, you'll see a similar one-off example. But most extant capelets from this time period of similar construction were either covered in beading or had fringed sections for the arms. All of these examples date to the mid to late 1880s. By 1889 and 1890, the shoulders of the outer garments began to grow, as did the overall circumference of the cape itself. This was to accommodate the large gigot sleeves that were so popular in the 1890s. I almost prefer this understated, elegant style instead of the ostentatious and over-the-top beading and fringe that was popular in the 1870s and 1880s. There's just something about it that makes it so classic. The slight puff at the shoulders dates this piece to the later 1880s, and the tight-fitting bodice style of the capelet make it relatively easy to see why this particular style wasn't very popular. While it's extremely warm, you basically couldn't move your arms upward, and the beaded capelets definitely allowed room for more movement. On the inside, the capelet is lined with a lovely deep purple silk, and it's in absolutely amazing condition. The silk hasn't shattered at all, which is surprising considering its age and the potential dyes that were used to make the deep purple color. There's a few spots where the weft has remained and the warp has worn through, but that luckily gives us a chance to peek inside. You can tell that it was worn and loved, but whoever owned it took extremely good care of it. The inner facing is a thick pad of felted wool, which you can sort of see in the wear of the lining. It's placed throughout the garment and must have been made as a separate piece, much like the lining and the velvet, and then attached in place when all three layers were connected. The collar is actually lined with something much stiffer. It's not as fluffy as the rest of the capelet, but it's stiff enough for it to stand on its own without any additional reinforcement stitching. The silk lining the collar has been cut on the bias and made from two 7-inch panels. In terms of construction, this garment is made of 3 components. The back section, 2 front lapels that are attached at the shoulder, and the collar. The back of the garment and the shoulders are all one piece and are accommodated by cutting a curved line down from the shoulder. This is then whip-stitched into place by a thick black silk thread. What you see on the inside at the shoulder seam is very different from the outside. The lining is gathered in whatever way possible to make room for the shoulder on the inside, while the exterior of the shoulder is gathered into nice little pleats to create some volume. Large hook and die closures run up the length of the bodice front about 1.25 inches apart, or 3.175 centimeters. These, of course, were sewn on before the lining was attached, so all the threads are hidden. The closures on the neck are slightly different, still hook and eye, just smaller. There's a little 3/4 of an inch or 2.54 centimeter panel running up the eye side, so if one hook did happen to come undone, you wouldn't see the bodice underneath. This was attached last with the fell stitch. The black silk threads can be easily seen. There is a tag in this, and dating solely off the tag was also a bit of a pain, as the merchant was extremely prosperous and I couldn't find many extant examples in museum collections. Essentially, A.E. Burkhardt and Company was a Cincinnati furrier, hatter, and eventually a coat and cloak emporium that ran into the 1990s. Adam E. Burkhardt, a German immigrant that arrived in Cincinnati with his parents in 1853 at the age of 8, eventually began working with a furrier and hatter, learning the tricks of the trade, and eventually becoming the store's general manager. After 12 years there, he bought out the business and renamed it the Burkhardt Brothers in 1866. He built the business from the ground up and at some point changed the name to A.E. Burkhardt Company, and became so successful that in the 1890s he was taking out ads in Harper's Bazaar and had 2 retail locations in Cincinnati. One was 7 floors. The city coined him the pioneer fur merchant of the West. There's a bit of a scandalous history involving the company in its later years, and if you're interested in learning more about that, I've linked the blog down below.
Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. And for more content on fashion and other fun things like this, be sure to visit my blog, which I'll link down below, and I'll see you next time.